Hello lovely humans and welcome back to my channel. In this week's video we're going to talk about things your guests will absolutely maybe kind of hate. Yes, I recognize that the title of this video is like a little bit clickbaity, but like don't hate the player, hate the game. Alright? And this list isn't meant to scare you into doing everything your guests want you to do, but it's more to just prepare you to kind of avoid these little pitfalls that make guests unhappy and want to leave. Because whether you've paid $8,000 or $80,000, you've spent a lot of money to have these people present. And you definitely want them to celebrate alongside you for as long as possible instead of leaving because you overlooked a little detail. So don't be scared by this list, but it's definitely something to keep in mind if you want your guests to hang around. So basically this is like an entire list of things that make your guests leave early. They just do. And before I get in the comments down below, like my guests can deal with it, if any of these things are not a concern to you, then literally ignore what's coming out of my mouth. You do not have to listen to some random stranger on the internet. You do not have to do everything that I'm telling you to do. That's okay. That's the power of free will, you know? And then there's the flip side of that of, well, my guests wouldn't leave because of blah, blah, blah. I'm here to tell you that it's not quite a scientific case study, but it's enough for me to say I've seen guests leave because of these things. All right? Wedding guests are fickle creatures. It doesn't mean that they don't love you. It doesn't mean that they don't love your love story. But if these needs are not met, these basic needs are not met, then they will go and figure it out themselves. So without further ado, let's just jump right on into it. And just as a quick reminder to get 15% off the master plan with code Let's Do This. So if you've been on the fence and not quite sure if you want to try it out, now is definitely the time before this code expires. So jump on down there, click the link, and use code Let's Do This. So for your guests, you want them to be comfortable. And when I say comfortable, I mean not uncomfortable. I don't mean that you have to have the cushiest chairs or spritzers hand served by someone wearing a butler outfit. Like, we're not talking fancy comfort. We're talking the opposite of uncomfortable, all right? We just want to be, like, there's a scale. We're not talking about here, all right? We are talking about, like, here, just not uncomfortable, right? The first thing that guests hate is if they are too hot or if they are too cold. I have literally seen a guest pass out from the heat before. So if there is not adequate shade or enough cold beverages, they will leave to make themselves comfortable elsewhere. Why? Because no one wants to stick around if it's super hot and there's no way of protecting your body. And on the flip side of that, if a guest is too cold, they will also leave. Our rule of thumb is if it goes below like 60 degrees, maybe even 55, we do recommend that you bring in heaters. Guests can withstand cold for a short period of time, but if they are exposed to it for too long, they will again leave to protect their bodies. It is innately within us to want to survive situations. So if we are miserable, we're not going to stick around. So what does that mean for you and your wedding day? Well, obviously we've done a couple videos here on this channel about different seasons and how to prepare for those. So I would suggest watching one of those for your particular season, but basically make sure there's shade if it's hot and plenty of cold water. Or on the flip side, make sure there's a space for guests to get warm. If that's a bonfire, great. If that's space heaters, wonderful. If that's an indoor space, also great. And if you're sitting there thinking like, tough, if people are going to leave, like if they can't hang, then they can go ahead and leave. That's your prerogative. That's totally fine. I'm not here to change your mind. I am just saying though that they will leave. It doesn't matter how cute your love story is. If it's 100 degrees outside and there's not enough cold water, guests will go. Another thing that guests hate is not enough restrooms. I have literally seen a guest leave an event space to go somewhere else to go to the restroom because the line was so long. I don't even know if that guest came back. Now they could have, possibly, I'm not quite sure. I just didn't see him or his wife, I think, for the rest of the evening. Now, of course, that's like a singular case study. That's just something to keep in mind. So how do we combat this? We make sure that we have one restroom for every 30 to 50 people. That means if you have 200 guests, you probably need at minimum 4 restrooms. Because again, if they're doing the potty dance for 15 minutes waiting to get into the stall, I think we can all agree that that's not super fun for anybody and that ups the likelihood of them leaving. Again, you've paid a lot for them to be there. Let's make sure they stick around. Next thing on the list is food. No, guests don't hate food. They love food. What they do hate is if food takes too long. Perfect case study. We had an event that was catered by a food truck that ended up taking, I kid you not, about 2 hours from the very first plate to the very last plate. So that means we had to kick off the rest of the night, toasts, dancing, all of that kind of stuff, while people were still waiting for their food. So what ended up happening is they finally got their food, ate it, and then just left. They had waited so long for their food that their patience meter had basically just dwindled to nothing, and they were done. And they left early. A generous portion of the guests left early. It's not that your guests don't care about you. It's not that they don't care about your love story. So how do you combat this? Well, one, talk to your caterer or your food truck or whomever is providing this service and ask them how long it will be from the first plate to the last plate. Ideally, we want that under an hour, but an hour and 15 is okay. 2 hours, that's really, really long. In addition to food taking too long, not having enough. Surefire way for people to leave early. So if they didn't eat beforehand expecting to eat at your event, get to the buffet line and realize there's absolutely nothing left, they're gonna go and feed themselves, which, like all of the other things on this list, make perfect sense. Not many guests are going to want to skip dinner. So how do you make sure that you have enough? And I have a whole video on different catering styles, so I do recommend checking that one out, because I think one way that people can run out pretty darn quickly is if there's no one monitoring the serving. They don't have to specifically be serving, but at least watching serving, because some guests will just keep heaping food onto their plates because they're hungry and they're not thinking about the last guy in line. Next on the list of things guests really, really don't like would be large timeline gaps. Now, of course, I would love to introduce this first. There are plenty of religious services that have to happen at a certain time in the church. For example, a Catholic service has to happen at 11 a.m. That's the only time slot that the church has available. Well, a lot of people want an evening reception. There are going to be some natural gaps. Oftentimes, holding food and drinks above someone's head will ensure that they're going to show up. Those aren't the ones that I'm talking about. What I am talking about is large spans of time where guests can get bored. You're not gonna like me saying this, but guests don't just come to your wedding day to celebrate your love story. That's a huge reason of why they're there. But they also want to be entertained. And if they stay bored for too long, they will go. Based on my very scientific case studies, it's pretty accurate. If your guests are bored, they will leave. Now, if you'll indulge me for just a moment, I will share a story time. Now, this event was kind of the perfect storm for guests leaving early. And I'll share a little bit with you. One, it was ridiculously hot that day. Guests were plastered into the shade in as many places as possible, and it was work to get them into the ceremony space. So I already knew that people were uncomfortable. Two, there wasn't enough water. Guests were asking for water before the ceremony. We honestly didn't even have enough to get us through the entire evening. So I already knew, oh my gosh, if they're this warm that they're already asking for water and I can't even get them to the seats, I need to be really mindful of this. When we hit cocktail hour, the couple and the photographer were gone for an extended period of time. So cocktail hour was about 30 or 45 minutes longer than it should have been. Couple that with the fact that there wasn't any alcohol, which is fine, but in some circles, guests do show up anticipating getting a nice, refreshing adult beverage, and if there isn't that option, some of them may duck out early. Like I said, wedding guests are fickle creatures. We finally get to bring everybody inside, and we get the evening going. We get everybody fed, and it's time for toasts. They had 45 minutes worth of toasts. 45 minutes worth of toasts. Y'all, when I tell you that there was an entire table watching a football game on someone's phone and cheering when a team scored a touchdown, they were bored out of their minds. It was so long. I think actually it was even closer to an hour. So when toasts were finally over, I kid you not, all the guests stood up and half of them left. Just left. At that point, they had been exposed to heat for a super long period of time. They were thirsty and there wasn't really anything that we could do about it. And then they sat there for so long, just waiting to be entertained. Toast can obviously be funny, but unless every single one of them was a stand-up comedian, an hour of sitting there is not entertaining. And again, I know this sounds harsh, but let's do a quick reminder of why I'm sharing this with you. You want your guests to celebrate in this experience with you. You've paid a lot of money for them to be here, so let's avoid the pitfalls that may cause them to leave early. Because one, you want to celebrate with them, and two, you spent good money for them to have their hiney there. So keep these things in mind. And now for two alternates, okay? One, alcohol. Like I said, it's not a deal breaker for everybody, but it is for some, and they might leave early if you're not serving it. You might care, you might not care. Just sharing my experiences. And two, poor entertainment. Obviously, with the toast situation, guests got very bored. If you have a bad DJ, guests will also get very bored. If they come to your event expecting a lit dance floor and they want to get down with their bad selves and your DJ is not good and they're not entertained by what's happening, it ups the likelihood of them leaving early. Now, inevitably, whenever I bring up something like this, I get in the comments, well, what if you're not doing dancing? What if you don't have a DJ? That's perfectly fine. Conversation is entertainment. If people are conversing and hanging out and enjoying each other's company, that is entertainment. You don't need to bring in a stand-up comedian or lawn games. You can if you want to. I actually think a comedian at a wedding would be hilarious. Wait, can we do that? Can we make that happen? Someone, please? Instead of dancing, just like have a whole stand-up comedy show? That would be amazing. That's actually a really good idea. Wait, we need to do this. So that's why a DJ is an alternate. I have said this 1,000 times. You guys are probably bored of me saying this. I think that DJs are the unsung heroes of a wedding day. I think that having a good DJ will make your wedding day experience absolutely incredible. And having a bad one could have the opposite effect. But if you are not having one at all whatsoever, that does not mean that your wedding is going to be awful and people won't be entertained and they will leave early, okay? That's why it's an alternate, all right? Sometimes when I make these videos, I just get like a whole myriad of comments of just like, wow, that's really harsh. Wow, my guests would never do that. Or, you know, if that's how they feel, they can go ahead and leave. You are completely entitled to your opinion. You're also free to share it in the comments below. I'm just saying, from someone who's behind the scenes, behind the curtain, watching all of this go down, these are things that you should absolutely keep in mind if you want your guests to enjoy your wedding day to the fullest right alongside you. As long as you take care of their basic needs, you should be totally fine. If you guys haven't done so already, like this video because you like the video, and jump on down there, hit subscribe, hang out with me a little bit longer. Let's just keep planning this wedding together, shall we? Like you and me. Let's hang out. I got you. It's not a big deal. Let's roll. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, let's see, where else? We got Facebook groups, all of that, all of the good stuff down below, okay? And until next week, bye guys.